The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning and welcome to Focus on the Liturgy here on Catholic Chicago. We are on WNDZ Radio, YouTube, and Facebook streaming. I am Todd Williamson from the Office for Divine Worship, and we are here every fourth Wednesday of the month doing exactly what our show says, right, Timothy?
That's right. We are blessed always to break open the liturgy and to talk about the wonderful goodness of our encounter with the risen Christ in our liturgical celebrations.
Timothy, you didn't get to do your normal introduction of yourself.
So yeah, this is Timothy from St. Thomas the Apostle down in Hyde Park.
And we are in the fourth week of Easter, and so that will be the topic of our show today. Talking about and breaking open the season, the liturgies, the celebrations, the rites, the texts that are part of it. But the entry to the season, obviously, Timothy, is the celebration of the Triduum. How was it at St. Thomas this year?
Oh, it was very good. As a liturgist, exhausting, of course, as always. But yeah, it was just very prayerful, and it's always moving to see people gather for each of those 3 days, and the kinds of prayer and intention and just the community coming together in those sacred times is always special. And
the celebration of the sacraments, which are key to not only the celebration of Easter itself, Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday, but is key throughout the whole Easter season. Before the show began, we were talking, and you had baptisms and other sacraments celebrated at the Easter Vigil.
Yeah, we celebrated 4 baptisms for 2 adults and 2 children. And one of the adults, his son made his first communion at that liturgy. And so now the whole family is fully gathered together. The son will be confirmed at some point, but yeah, it was a beautiful celebration for them and a long journey, because that particular catechumen at the time had been in the process for 2 years. And so it was a very joy-filled moment for him, and the joy radiating from his face after being baptized, and even after the liturgy, is sort of the glow of, I always call it, sort of the glow of baptism, but certainly the shine, if you will, of even the sacred chrism of being anointed to be Christ's own was wonderful. So, oh
my gosh, what a great way to begin the season, and that did it. And then we were off. We celebrated the octave of Easter, where every day was a solemnity, the rank of a solemnity. The Gloria was sung throughout that whole week. There was the option to sing the sequence before the gospel. Just a week-long celebration of the mysteries that take place. Of course, for those of us who are baptized already, that was what was key for us, was renewing our baptism at the Easter Vigil or on Easter Sunday morning, and the rest of the season flows out of that. And it always gets me, Timothy, and you just being in parish ministry, it's important to keep that joy. It's important to keep that that amazement. It's important to celebrate the whole season. It's 50 days long.
Yeah.
Right, it's a week of weeks, 7 weeks that we celebrate the mystery of our baptism and the mystery of the resurrection and our incorporation in it through our baptism. And sometimes, we're in the fourth week now of the season. Is the Paschal joy waning at all, or is it still vibrant in the parish?
Well, a great question that I don't actually have an answer for, because I've been traveling, so I've not been in the parish since Easter Sunday, partly because I was with my family, and then I had confirmation from my godson. So the Easter joy in that regard has been going on, but I haven't been here on Sundays recently to experience the joy. But I'm quite sure that it is still alive. But I hear what you're saying, because it is hard sometimes, especially by the fourth or fifth week. The readings, beautiful readings, but they shift. They're not so like resurrection focused, in that first octave day, right? Like we get a very clear sense, or all those octaves, all the days of the octave. And so we're going to hear Good Shepherd. We're going to hear all these different, this road to Emmaus, all connected, but it's not the resurrection story. So sometimes we might forget, or maybe we're not singing Easter music anymore, depending on the parish, or if your music minister isn't aware. So I think that's one of the things we do here very well, is we keep doing the sprinkling rite all during the Easter season. So we give thanksgiving over the water, and then we sprinkle as a reminder of our baptism. And it's one of those things, we craft the language, because it's one of those places you can, and these are similar words, to help people remember what we did at Easter and what we continue to do during the season. So they're sprinkled. We keep singing Easter music, making sure that there's a sense of that joyfulness, and not letting that wane in some way. So even though I've not been here, I've seen the worship aids. I've been putting that stuff together. So I think that we're doing what we can. I'm getting a new delivery of flowers this week, to kind of refresh, yes, some of those Easter flowers, to keep that in mind. And for Pentecost, which will be coming in several weeks, we'll have fresh flowers for that, just to kind of culminate that week of weeks, as you said,
well,
in a beautiful way.
Yeah, it is, but that's what we celebrate. That's the theology of the season, right? And so in the fourth week, as we are right now, or even next week in the fifth week of Easter, it's still appropriate to sing Jesus Christ is risen today. That's what how it takes that long to celebrate and to unpack the great mystery of the resurrection, but also to unpack what God has done to us in the celebration of Easter this year. It's funny, because as you were talking, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the readings throughout that we hear through this season. But right immediately after, in the octave and even in the second week of Easter, it's the resurrection accounts, right? The resurrection appearances, and so that's the initial spotlight in the text and in the readings early in the Easter season. But as we get into it now, this is what we start hearing are so what, right? This is the so what season. So what? Yeah. So what that I renewed my baptism at Easter. In the later part of the season, what we hear is, this is what it means now that you have renewed your baptism. This is what it means now that you have been renewed in the mystery of baptism and confirmation, in which God recreated us into the image of His beloved.
Yeah, I was just looking at the prayer after communion on Easter Sunday morning. I think, and this is just one example, but all of the prayers that we pray during the season reiterate or emphasize what you just said, Todd. Like, it's reminding us that this is the so what season. So we have done this activity of renewing our promises. And I was reflecting on this a few weeks ago, even as I was home with my family after Easter Sunday. As I've gotten older and I've paid a little bit more attention, of course, I've studied the liturgy in different times. But again, hearing these words anew each year, or because of the different context I'm in. So this prayer on Easter Sunday morning: look upon your church, O God, with unfailing love and favor, so that, renewed by the paschal mysteries, she may come to the glory of the resurrection. Now, that might seem like nice, fluffy language on the surface, but if I'm listening to that and having shared at the Eucharistic table with the community that's gathered there, like, we have been made church by this action in this Easter season, and my so what is, I share in the glory of the resurrection, and by sharing in that glory, I am to make that relevant or evident in the world. The story of salvation, the reality of salvation that is offered to the world by the Paschal mystery, that in that Triduum we unpacked, we celebrated, we entered into in a very, very intimate way.
Well, listen to the opening prayer that we're going to hear this coming Sunday, the fifth Sunday of Easter. Already well past halfway through the season. But listen to the images and the references in that opening prayer. Constantly, Almighty and ever-living God, constantly accomplish the Paschal mystery within us, that those you were pleased to make new in holy baptism may, under your protective care, bear much fruit. There's the so what, right? The prayer reminds us, and I mean, we could easily insert in there that those you were pleased to renew in holy baptism. For those of us who renewed our baptism at the Easter Vigil, we're still called to bear fruit. That's the so what.
Yeah.
Right. So what the elect were baptized in your parish, Timothy. So what? What does that mean for their life now? And for those of us who renewed our baptism, what does that mean for our life today? For this Easter season, for going out into the rest of the liturgical year. So what that God did this to us.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to, especially with the newly baptized or the neophytes, meaning new plant, thinking about, we've talked about this, I think, on the show before, but these newly baptized, they've just been newly planted, if you will, into this life of Christ. They've been preparing for it, but now they are intimately united to this as we are, the baptized. This is an opportunity during the season, which is what we call mystagogy, is to break open the mysteries in which they celebrated during the vigil itself. But coming back to what you just said, Todd, you're looking at that prayer on the fifth Sunday is, what does this mean? And how did your experience of being baptized? Let them tell their story in the bulletin, or however you might do that in your parish, on social media, record them, have them reflect on the experience of their initiation, because that will continue to renew our own experience of renewing our baptismal promises as the weeks unfold. Because we have an opportunity then too to reflect on our own baptism, our sharing in the Eucharist, our confirmation, all of those different pieces, so that we begin to answer that so what question. Well, it does mean something, because I'm sent from this liturgy to proclaim the good news in some way, whether that be in the work that I do at a shelter, a food, a soup kitchen, my workplace even, or teaching, or as a catechist, whatever it might be. We are sent forth. And by sharing our story, we're formed to continue to deepen that.
That's the fruit that the prayer is talking about, right? That grant that those of us who have been baptized or who have renewed our baptism, grant that your church may bear fruit, having experienced everything that we experienced in the Triduum and Easter, right? Let it have an effect. Let it mean something. Let it make a difference. Because that's what we're called to, and that's what the season calls us to. I mean, that's the whole. When we come back, we're going to break here in just a few seconds. But when we come back from this first break, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the liturgy of the Word during the Easter season, because it is very unique, and it unpacks this so what that we're talking about. Stay with us for more focus on the liturgy. We'll be back right after this first break.
Catholic Charities' Loss program was created more than 40 years ago to help survivors of suicide wherever they are in the grieving process. This nationally recognized program continues to offer a safe, non-judgmental environment where survivors of suicide can find community, direction, and resources for healing after suffering the devastating loss of a loved one. Online and in-person services are available for individuals, couples, children, and families of all faith traditions. To learn more, call 312-655-7283 or email loss@catholiccharities.net. Don't suffer alone. We are here to offer loving outreach to survivors of suicide. Contact Catholic Charities today.
I feel special. I feel great. I got good grades.
We've seen a huge surge in our kids now meeting or exceeding grade level. Come check us out. You may have never thought we were an option before.
Our school communities provide students with academic excellence and character education in a supportive and stable learning environment. Come see for yourself. Visit artchicago.org/findaschool.
Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program has assisted thousands of single parents who are working to become more self-sufficient through education and employment opportunities. Our experienced case managers accompany participants for up to 5 years on their journey to identify, address, and break down barriers to improving their quality of life and achieving meaningful goals for themselves and for their families. Professional, compassionate assistance is offered in a safe and trusting environment as participants develop the skills needed to become financially stable and able to support themselves. Every achievement starts with a decision to try. To learn more about Catholic Charities' Family Self-Sufficiency Program, call 847-782-4233 or visit CatholicCharities.net.
Welcome back to Focus on the Liturgy here on WNDZ. We are also streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. We are talking about the Easter season. We're in the 4th week of Easter, halfway through it. But in that, before that first break, Timothy, we were talking about the Easter season being the season of so what, right? The season begins, of course, with the celebration of the Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday, where we either baptize adults, the elect, those who have been journeying with us. We baptize those who haven't yet been baptized, but we also, for the rest of us, we renew our baptism. That's the whole point of Lent. That's the whole point of bringing us to that moment and then so Easter, in unpacking it in this show, like we said, Easter is the so what season, and we were talking about the text that we hear in the Mass prayers and in the readings during this season. And I'm even struck, Timothy, by the prayer after communion for today, Wednesday of the 4th week of Easter. Graciously be present to your people, we pray, O Lord, and lead those you have imbued with heavenly mysteries to pass from former ways to newness of life. So that theme just runs throughout all of these 7 weeks, and I think one of the points we were trying to make in that first segment was for the listeners. Don't tire of it. don't tire of hearing this. It takes 7 weeks to celebrate the greatness of what God has done for us in our baptism. So even that prayer after communion. Yeah. Lead those you have imbued with heavenly mysteries. I love that, right? And I think all of us are quick to be able to identify the neophytes Like you said, it comes from a Greek term. It means young plant, right, or newly planted. And that's how the church refers to those who have just been baptized at Easter as neophytes. So it's easy for us to call to mind them in this prayer. But Timothy, you, me, all of our listeners who've been baptized as infants or maybe another way, we've all been imbued with heavenly mysteries through our baptism and our confirmation. And so the prayer references us as well. So allow us to pass from former ways to newness of life. And then listen to the opening prayer for tomorrow, Thursday of the 4th week. O God, who restore human nature to yet greater dignity than at its beginning, look upon the amazing mystery of your loving kindness, and in those you have chosen to make new. That's us. That's those who have been the neophytes, those who have just been baptized, but that's us as well, those of us who have renewed our baptism. Those you have chosen to make new through the wonder of rebirth, may you preserve the gifts of your endearing grace and blessing. So to the listeners, don't tire of this. Don't wane. Revel yet in even now, the 4th week, as we get into the 5th and the 6th weeks. Revel in the mystery of what God has done for us and what God has done to us in our baptism, and reflect on what that means. What difference does it make in your life? Because if we've observed a good Lent, right, a 90 days of preparation, then that should make a difference now that we have been renewed in baptism.
Yeah, no, most definitely. As you were thinking or talking about that, I was just thinking to myself, is the profundity of these 50 days because of what God has done, and at different moments of our lives, how that may play out, whether we're super in tune with it or not in tune with it, but we have an opportunity, an invitation during those 50 days to really continue to deepen exactly what you said, Todd, what we did during the Lenten season, what we professed at the Easter Vigil or Easter Sunday morning, and letting that grace to continue to deepen within our lives so that we come to know the risen Christ more intimately in that way, and therefore be transformed in the way that we live in the world.
I was just going to say, be transformed, and exactly what you just said, and have that show by the way that we live in the world. And so let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about the liturgy of the Word during the Easter season, because I think it enfleshes and it unfolds and explores exactly what you were just talking about, right? So earlier we said, in the Sunday readings, right after, early in the Easter season, it's the resurrection appearances, as you said, Emmaus and the breakfast on the seashore, meeting the women at the tomb. So we get those accounts, doubting Thomas, right? But then the accounts of the resurrection. But then later in the season, we start to hear, what does it mean to live now as a baptized follower of Jesus? And you see that in the structure in a most unique way. The liturgy of the Word during the Easter season is very unique, right? Where the first reading normally comes from the Old Testament on Sundays. That's not the case in Easter, is it?
Right. Yeah. During Easter season, we get the Acts of the Apostles for our first reading. So
throughout the whole Easter season, throughout on every Sunday.
Yeah, every Sunday, and even the weekday, right?
Yeah. The weekday readings. The weekday readings will fluctuate between the epistles, but it's always Acts of the Apostles. For that first reading, and it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, the Acts of the Apostles is the account of the life of the community after the resurrection. Well, that's us. That's us as well, right? So those great accounts of everybody was of one mind and one heart, and they sold their property and they gave to the poor and laid their belongings at the feet of the apostles. They gathered. It'll say that the community gathered for the prayers, for the hymns, and for the breaking of the bread. So we hear. In a sense, we're shown through the Acts of the Apostles throughout the Easter season what it means to live a life of resurrection.
Yeah, and we hear in those stories, I think, I don't know if they're early on or if they're later on, but that the numbers continue to grow in that sense in the Acts of the Apostles. And some of that has to be attributed to sort of the fervor of that early church, the fervor of them being so intimately connected to the historical event, if you will, but also keeping that memory and entering into the life of the Paschal mystery and continuing to live that out, as you pointed out, in the breaking of the bread and the sharing of their life together. And it is a call for us as a Catholic Christian community to consider, what does resurrected living look like in our home and in our parishes, in the ways that we are gathering, not just in prayer on Sunday, because we do that, but that's what leads us into the world, right, to live. And so just like the apostles, and if you've read the Acts of the Apostles, in those early days of the church, not everything was always nice and rosy either. There was conflict, and they were working out some of that conflict. We may not hear that so much in the Easter season. I'm terrible at quoting scripture, as you all know, so I don't remember all those pieces. But in the midst of even some of that, they still gather because it is Christ who binds them together. They're gathering to celebrate, to pray together. And I've shared this on the show before. I always sort of have this rosy utopian image of the Acts of the Apostles, and just wish we could sort of live what I imagine the early church was like, us living in community, praying morning prayer together, celebrating Eucharist together, and going out to the world together. But I know that is my utopian vision of what I would like to happen.
But the reality, Timothy, is that's what the liturgies call us to during this season. So the Acts of the Apostles. Yeah, you made the comment earlier. Yes, even during the weekday, we hear an awful lot from the Acts of the Apostles. We have from at Mass. So we have for the last week and a half. Tomorrow we'll hear from the first letter of St. Peter, though. But listen to the text. Listen to the reading for today, Wednesday of the fourth week. It begins from the Acts. It's the Acts of the Apostles, and it begins in exactly what you were just talking about. The word of God continued to spread and grow. And then it goes on to give the account of Barnabas and Saul spreading the word out in the various regions outside of Jerusalem. So that's exactly what you were just talking about.
Yeah, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, is sharing that word. I was at my nephew and godson's confirmation recently, and I remember what my prayer was as the laying of the hands was being prayed. That prayer that mentions the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. That my prayer for him, and I put my hand on his shoulder while that was happening, because and I know other people don't do that, but my prayer was that the gospel can continue to resonate and be alive in his heart, so that it can resonate and be alive in the world, and that the Holy Spirit would continue to fill him, just as that early church in that way. And I hope that that's a prayer for all of us, that as we hear the word of God proclaimed week after week, day after day, if you are daily mass goer, that word is rousing our heart in some way, challenging us. Maybe it's not as comfortable as we'd like sometimes. And they're not just stories that are niceties that we hear, but they are inviting us and hopefully reflecting back to us what it means for us in this time, in 2024, to live as resurrected people. In elementary school, there was a song, and this is an old song, We Are an Easter People, and maybe Carrie Landry wrote it, I don't remember, but as a as a middle schooler and even in junior high, I always thought about when we sang that song at school masses, during the Easter season, because we are an Easter people and Alleluia is our song.
Yeah, yes.
And that's exactly what the Acts of the Apostles is trying to remind us of in the gospel. Like all of that is, we are an Alleluia people. We are a people who go forth and proclaim the goodness of salvation and the goodness of the gift that has been bestowed upon us and shared because of our baptism. And the joy that we have, hopefully that we have, because
that
of
we
that
should
great
have.
gift that we should have, that should radiate from us because of that good gift. And Pope Francis again talks about that so often.
Oh my gosh,
that even in Joy of the Gospel, the title of his, was that the first encyclical?
Yeah.
But that we are to radiate the joy, being an Alleluia people, working for peace, working for justice, being all that Christ has called us to be as a resurrected people.
And you know what? We got to take a break here, Timothy. But when we come back, we want to continue this conversation about the liturgy of the Word during the Easter season, because it continues from exactly what you were just saying. Stay with us. We'll be back for more focus on the liturgy right after these messages.
At Catholic Charities, we want to remind you that we are here for anyone who is a victim of domestic violence or anyone who has a concern about someone they think may be a victim. Domestic violence affects millions of people each year, both women and men, of every race, religion, culture, and economic status. It includes physical, psychological, and emotional abuse, inflicted in both subtle and overt ways. The impact on children can be devastating. If you or someone you know are victims of domestic violence and you are looking for a place for healing and recovery, call us at 773-935-3434 in Cook County and 224-430-4977 in Lake County. A safer, happier tomorrow can begin today.
I am a seminarian.
The Church needs compassionate and well-trained priests to help guide each of us through life.
What inspires me, what draws me always to the priesthood is continue to see priests be a beacon of hope for other people.
You can play a part in the education of these young men as they prepare for a life of service to others.
I want to be that beacon of hope too, and it sets my heart on fire.
To support our seminarians, make your gift at archchicago.org/seminarian fund or call 312-534-7959.
The Cemetery Ministry is a core ministry of our Catholic faith tied to the corporal works of mercy. It's comforting to know that our Catholic cemeteries are caring for the remains of our loved ones awaiting the resurrection. There are 44 Archdiocese of Chicago Catholic cemeteries willing to help you in your time of loss. Call 708-449-6100 or visit CatholicCemeteryChicago.org. Catholic Cemeteries, serving the Catholic community since 1837.
You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Thanks for letting us be part of your morning. Now again, Catholic Chicago.
If you are just joining us, welcome back to the second half of Focus on the Liturgy. I'm Todd Williamson from the Office for Divine Worship for the Archdiocese of Chicago.
Sorry, Todd. And I'm Timothy Johnston from St. Thomas the Apostle. It's much easier when we're in the studio together.
As you can see on the stream, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, Timothy is remote today. I'm here in the studio, and we're talking about the Easter season, unpacking what does it mean now that I have been renewed in my baptism? Or if you are a neophyte, what does it mean now that I have died in the waters of the font and God has recreated me as a new creation? So what, Timothy? We were calling it this Easter the so what season, and how the texts of the Mass, the prayers of the Mass, and the readings give us direction for for how we should live now that we have been renewed in baptism. We noted that for all of the Sundays of Easter, the readings come from the Acts of the Apostles, the history book, if you will, of how the early church spread, how the disciples lived after the resurrection, because that gives instruction, that gives direction for us in how we should live. And Timothy, in that first half of the show, you were talking about your utopian sense, your utopian vision of the early church, right? Look at the first reading for this coming Sunday, the fifth Sunday of Easter, obviously from the Acts of the Apostles, but it's the account of Saul arriving in Jerusalem, and the disciples there being afraid of him. But look at how this first reading for this coming Sunday ends. The church throughout all Judea, Galilee, and Samaria was at peace. It was being built up and walked in the fear of the Lord, and with the consolation of the Holy Spirit, it grew in numbers. There's that utopia you're talking about, right? So for the listeners, pay attention to these readings. They give us direction. And this year in year B, Timothy, I'm struck by similar to year A, right? All of the readings the second readings for all the Sundays of Easter this year come from one book, one letter. And it's the first letter of John, which was written to a young Christian community. And so it is filled with instruction and guidance and exhortation on how you should live now that you are renewed in your membership in the body of Christ. Right, and so you get instructions throughout. So again, for this coming Sunday, the second reading, let us love. John writes, children, right? You are young Christians. You are children in the faith. Let us love, not in word or speech, but in deed and truth. And this is how we shall know that we belong to the truth. And so this is how you should live now that you're renewed.
Yeah, First John is one of my favorites, especially in the season. One of the things, just partly because of the reasons you said, but even this is a good example of this particular reading. Sorry, my reading's on this screen over here. But in First John, there's this lot of imagery about sharing gifts, of course, but being called beloved, recognizing the love of God, recognizing
of God. You are children of God.
That we are children, and that and again, the end of the towards the end of the passage, love one another just as He commanded us. You get that theme throughout First John, and that kind of is reiterated throughout this season. What's beautiful about this, and you said this earlier in terms of the unique structure of the lectionary during the season, is that all three readings complement one another.
Yes.
They're not just randomly chosen, but they support something. And so as preachers are looking at this, even the Psalms, so you get that first reading, which we've been talking about, that sort of lays out this early Christian community and the ways that they're living, the fervor, the zeal of which they are going forth and sharing and living together. That Psalm then gives thanksgiving for what God has done. So I think was on the fourth Sunday we used Psalm 118 again, which we hear. I think it was that week, and so we hear these psalms that continue to give thanks and praise to God. That second reading then, as we said, kind of lays out then, okay, well, how do you actually live in this community? And then the gospel, of course, continues to highlight this resurrected life in whatever way that trying to get us to focus on Christ, and probably maybe I'm not saying this the best way, but those final days of him on earth in some ways, especially like what I call the barbecue on the shore. But the eating with the fish, afterwards, those resurrection appearances, again inviting us to contemplate this mystery. So they're beautifully woven together, and the presence of the risen Lord throughout, you can kind of see that throughout each of these, the way that the lectionary is structured, if that makes sense.
Yes, no, it does. I mean, you were talking about the second reading from the first letter of John. Look at what we just heard this last Sunday. It all comes together, everything that you said. John writes, beloved, right? There's that beloved that you mentioned. See what love the Father has bestowed on us, that we may be called the children of God. Yet so we are. Right, so now live as children of God. Then live differently, and that's the message to us. That so what about the Easter season? Live as children of God. How will other people know that we are children of God? Unless you live, unless you follow the commandment, right? Love one another.
And what song comes to mind when you think about that?
Yeah.
The first song that popped in mind. They will know we are Christians by our love.
Yep.
And that sort of, I mean, whether you like that song or not, like there's truth in that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
and I think
yes.
this is what First John's getting at is they will know because we have been changed. We have moved from darkness into light. We have moved from sin to freedom. And that freedom allows us to love. That light allows us to enter into and experience the love of God, and therefore it flows from us, hopefully, in the ways that we live in the world.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, and so look to the gospel for this coming Sunday. And you have it all laid out for you. This is Jesus from the Gospel of John, the reading, I am the vine, and you are the branches. But look at how it ends. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. That's what there's our marching orders for the Easter season and for the rest of this year, in terms of having been renewed in baptism or having received baptism for the first time. That we and for our listeners, that we, you, Timothy, me, may bear much fruit in the world.
And that goes back to what you started with in terms of the collect for that Sunday, that fifth Sunday, because it talks about bear much fruit. Like
Right.
It's tied into, that doesn't always happen in the collects in terms of the very concrete connection, but that imagery is used. And what a beautiful way to make that connection.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so the texts of this season, the prayers of the Mass, the readings of the Mass, all support that. And this living in this newness of life, living a new life, different from 3 months ago, different from at the beginning of this civil year. We live that newness, and that's reflected in all other areas of the season as well, right? You were talking about the environment, in terms of the flowers and extra light, for example. There might be more candles in the sanctuary or around the church, and there's always the presence of the Paschal candle, the Christ candle, the Easter candle, and so talk a little bit about that. I love the Paschal candle. I love what it symbolizes. I love that we use it. So for every liturgy of this Easter season, it remains there, lit and burning.
Yeah, it's normally placed near the ambo, where the word is proclaimed during the Easter season.
Yep.
Because at the Easter Vigil, of course, when we processed it in, it was there. We sang the Exultet, which names and honors and gives thanks and praise to Christ, who is the light, who frees us from darkness. It is a symbol of Christ's light in the world. It's the light from which we light our baptismal candles when we baptize throughout the course of the year. It's present, as Todd just said, through every liturgy of the Easter season as a reminder of Christ's triumph over sin and death, of Christ's triumph over darkness, that he truly is the light that frees us and shatters that darkness, right? And so each of us have our baptismal candle. It's been lit from one of those Paschal candles over the years. It's also present at at every funeral that we have during the course of the year, as a reminder of being baptized into this life of Christ. And so it is a beacon, if you will. I used to tell my students,
it is a beacon.
Right, to think about like mariners, those on the sea, lighthouses are what drew them, making sure, especially on foggy nights, drew them into port correctly, or they knew where that's at. Well, think about the Easter candle in that sense, that it is something, a beacon that's drawing us and reminding us of who Christ is drawing us into the port, if you will, of the very heart of Christ himself, and reminding us of that. And there's the intimate connection of the word, I think, in that way. So we visually see that light calling us, but then we hear the word calling us, as we've been talking about, to live out that life. And so, how is that space decorated? How is your font decorated, or the environment around that, I should say? So we highlight these symbols during this season, not just to make them pretty, but we highlight them to remind us of the significance of what has happened, and what we continue to share in, because we continue to share in his death and resurrection.
I love that idea of the Paschal candle being a beacon, because it is. I mean, it's a symbol of Christ, right? That's Christ, the light of the world. That's what we sang and proclaimed at the Easter Vigil, and it literally is an image of Christ. It stands in our midst every Sunday, at every liturgy through this season, right. Almost like a century, right? And that's why we incense it. Right. Because it's an image of Christ. It's supposed to remind us of Christ, the light of the world. But it's also, as you said, supposed to remind us that since we have been baptized, and since that baptism has been renewed this Easter, we are to live as children of the light. We are to live an enlightened life. We have been enlightened by Christ, and shown how to live, how to make a difference, how to bring about the kingdom of God. It goes back to the prayer after communion on the fifth Sunday of the year that I've quoted before, right? Grant that now that we have been renewed in our baptism, may we joyfully bear fruit for the salvation of the world. That's the world, that it's not just us. It's not just. It's not. I have been renewed in my baptism for a reason, in order to bear fruit joyfully for the salvation of the world. Not just my own salvation, but the salvation of others. Right? Yeah. And so how do you John, the second letter, or the first letter of John, the second reading throughout this whole season, it's there where he says, we are children of the light. We should live now as children of the light.
Well, again, you just made me think of all these songs from my childhood. This is an old song, but and again, this is why I know some scripture, but these images were so powerful because we sang them. But we sang a song, we are children of the Lord, sons and daughters of light. Oh, yes. But again, reinforcing that we are sons and daughters, children of God, and that we live in God's light. Sang that all of my elementary school. And so that's something I believe because it was on my lips. It was a prayer that we sang that keeps that alive in our heart.
All right. We are late for our final break. We're going to do that real quick. And Timothy, when we come back to close out the show, talk a little bit about where we go from here in the Easter season, Ascension and to Pentecost. We're breaking open the Easter season, talking about the rites, the readings, the ritual, the prayer texts, how it teaches us and shows us how to live as those who have been renewed in baptism. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Did you know that Catholic Charities accepts car donations? If you're ready to free up space in your garage and put a stop to all those expenses that go along with owning a car, we will gratefully accept your donation, whether the car is running or not. You choose a pickup time that is convenient for you, and we will make the donation as easy as possible, free of charge. You'll receive a charitable donation receipt as well. We accept all types of vehicles nationwide, and you will know that your donation is made to Catholic Charities, an agency you can trust. To learn more about donating your car, call 877-786-4483. That's 877-786-4483. Thank you.
Welcome back to Focus on the Liturgy. We have just about 8 minutes left. Timothy, I lost track of time in that for the final break, but talking about Easter as the season of so what, that we've been renewed in baptism. So from here we go to these last couple of weeks. As we said, pay attention to the readings and the prayer texts. But we still have some major celebrations of the season of Easter yet to come. The Ascension of the Lord, which we will celebrate on May 12th this year, and of course ending in the celebration of Pentecost. But even on these days, we are given direction and guidance on what it means to live as a baptized member of the body of Christ. Right? You look at the reading, the gospel reading for Ascension. It's from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus said to his disciples, "Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature." Go and live your Christian life now that you've been baptized.
Right, which is connected to the first reading, Acts chapter 1, it's verse 8, and I'm again probably not going to quote it correctly, but you will receive power when the Spirit comes upon you, and you will go to the ends of the earth to proclaim basically the good news of salvation. So those connection between the first reading and the gospel. This is how we are to live. We will receive, or we have, if we've been confirmed and baptized, we've received the Spirit, so we go forth to proclaim the good news. Of course, Ascension we've spent all these days leading up to Ascension, hearing those stories of Jesus's last days on earth, those encounters with the disciples, right? And so here he's going to be taken up into heaven and be seated at the right hand of the Father. And I love this because the psalm, the refrain for the psalm that day is, "God mounts his throne with shouts of joy, a blare of trumpets for the Lord." Right. And again, it's the joy of this. Like, it isn't like, it isn't like, oh, Jesus, I mean, we could be sad. I'm sure the disciples were confused and sad. But here we are in this time, and we know that the goodness of God continues to reign because the promise of the Spirit has come, which we celebrate at Pentecost. But the triumphant joy that is in that psalm of that God mounts his throne with shouts of joy, a blare of trumpets for the Lord. What does our proclamation look like in terms of that? Do we believe if God has mounted and conquered sin and death, are we blaring our trumpets in the way that we proclaim the good news? Right. Are we shouting that good news? That's one of my favorite psalms.
By the way we live our lives. By the way we live our lives as Christians. And then, of course, a week later, the Easter season will culminate in the celebration of Pentecost. It's which in beautiful ways actually bookends the season, right? You made mention of the celebrating the Vigil of Pentecost, where the liturgy of the Word can be extended, much like it was at the very start of the season with the Easter Vigil on Holy Saturday night. And so in some ways, not in some ways, in many ways, Pentecost bookends the Easter Vigil in closing out the celebration of Easter. You can have this extended, and all of the readings at the Vigil on Saturday night before Saturday night of Pentecost, all of the readings are about the Holy Spirit and the power of the Spirit, right? And the gifts of the Spirit. And then, of course, on Pentecost Sunday, we hear the Pentecost account. Huddled in a room for fear of everything that has happened, fear for their own lives. There was a loud noise and a rushing wind and tongues of fire that rested upon the apostles. And the Spirit literally changes them, transforms them from a hidden bunch of scared, frightened disciples, unsure, their hope shattered. The Spirit literally transforms them, and they go out and preach Jesus. They go out and they announce the gospel.
Well, and this ties into if your parish celebrates the extended vigil, which we are doing here at St. Thomas this year, there are four. This is one of those changes. There are 4 Old Testament readings, and one of those is the Tower of Babel,
right?
Which plays into the sort of speaking of tongues and the beauty of the transition. Then that when the tongues of fire come upon those gathered in the upper room and the community in that case, they can understand one another, whereas Babel they could not.
Right.
So the Spirit comes together and renews and brings forth and unites the church, if you will, in that way, so that they can go to the ends of the earth, which we heard on the Ascension. So they can go to the ends of the earth sharing the good news, that they've come from all these places and they begin to understand one another. Now, metaphorically is probably how we interpret that, right? Like maybe they didn't understand exactly their language. Maybe they did. Who knows? I wasn't there. But the reality is they understood what God was calling them to do, and they understood it together in one heart and one mind.
Yep.
And they were going into the world with that courage, the fervor of the Spirit to proclaim that good news. So if your parish isn't celebrating the vigil in the extended form, because it is a separate liturgy, and you can still do the readings with the normal 4 readings without the extended readings, look at all of those readings is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And pray with them and look at them.
Oh my gosh. And again, note that we'd said in a way, in many ways, it mirrors the Easter Vigil. Each of those readings is followed by a psalm, just as at the Easter Vigil. Right, and so I just love how the church does that, and in that, and then the epistle for that is from Romans, and in the same way, Paul writes, the Spirit too comes to the aid of our weakness. The Spirit Himself intercedes with inexpressible groaning. So all of these images of the power of the Spirit, and that closes it out. That there is the celebration that ends the Easter season, but then sends us right now. It sends us into the rest of the year to live our Christian lives. I don't know that there are many parishes that do it, but liturgically, the season ends with Pentecost Vespers, evening prayer on Pentecost Sunday, which is it has all of this baptismal imagery, and is just beautiful. Are you guys going to celebrate it at St. Thomas?
Sadly, no.
Yes.
But I tried.
If
your parish is, or it's something you want to think about for next year, it's a great time to gather the newly baptized again, the 50 days after their baptism, and celebrate that in Vespers and evening prayer for Pentecost. It's a great thing to do. I would celebrate all the hours if I could within a community.
Oh my gosh, yes. So in these last couple seconds before we end, Timothy, just for our listeners, be mindful, participate mindfully and consciously in the liturgies. They teach us, they form us, they tell us how to live now that we have renewed our baptism.
Yeah.
We'll be back next month, 4th Wednesday.
Wonderful. God bless everyone.